Well, we couldn't do it in the end. We had the chance to go 6 for 6 against the Manchester clubs in the Premier League and across the Cups this season, but we fell at the final hurdle, losing 1-0 to Manchester City at home in what has turned out to be a really, really frustrating night. And I'm sure you guys share my frustrations and feelings coming out of that game, because it was a game of two halves, and I think Tottenham ultimately paid for their incredibly poor first half performance against City that gave them all the initiative, gave them the goal they needed to ultimately win the game as well. But I do want to say that there is a lot of encouragement that can be taken out of that game, and I do want to focus on that mainly for this sort of reaction video, because there's no point me sitting here sulking and being annoyed and angry about the result, because at the end of the day, the league's over. I'd be incredibly surprised if we finished in the top half of the table at this point. I think we're 10 points off of 8th place at this stage after the loss. Man United back on level on points with us now, and 16th place West Ham could be level on points with us if they beat Leicester. But I want to start, and I want to mainly focus on the positive stuff that we can take out of the game, because we have such a huge week coming up. We have an 8-day gap now between our next game, which is our biggest game of the season, away to AZ Alkmaar in the knockout rounds of the Europa League, a game that we're hoping to have Christian Romero, Mickey van der Ven, Dominic Solanke, Richarlison all back for. And I'm hoping that Ange is going to take the angle from this game that suggests that we were miles better than City in the second half, which we were. And the counter-argument to that, of course, is that Manchester City are poor, and they have been poor all season. But despite their recent results, they actually played well against Liverpool, and in the first half played very, very well against Tottenham tonight. But if we look at the stats from the game, right, it tells a very, very interesting story. So in total, the game finished 55% possession to Tottenham. We had 11 shots in total, 6 shots on target, created 2 big chances, missed 2 big chances, had 448 successful accurate passes and 8 corners. If we filter that and look at how many of those were in the second half, it's quite astounding to see. So we had 9 of those 11 shots in the second half, 4 on target, which is the majority of what we had. The 2 big chances we had in the game both came in the second half. Over half of the accurate passes in the second half as well, and nearly 3/4 of the corners that we had in the match all came in the second half. And that's the most frustrating thing, because we can walk away from this game tonight thinking we were incredibly unlucky not to take any points out of it, and I think Manchester City will think that as well. It's pretty crazy, because I've been keeping up on the post-match reaction, and Pep Guardiola been singing Tottenham's praises and absolutely going in on how good the squad is, how good Ange Postecoglou is, saying that he actually said Tottenham have one of the best depths of squad in the Premier League, with Son, Kulusevski on the bench tonight, Jed Spence coming off, who Pep Guardiola is clearly a very, very big fan of. We need to be careful and watch that one and make sure he doesn't try and poach him in the summer, because he came up to Jed Spence after the game and slapped him round the face, sort of pointed at his chest. I think he was very, very impressed with what he saw, and I hope Thomas Tuchel was as well. He was in the stands for the game, scouting him for England, no doubt, alongside maybe James Maddison. But yeah, that's the frustrating thing. I think Ange Postecoglou, on top of that, will be a little bit frustrated, but he's obviously been talking to the press as well. He said the reasoning for putting those players on the bench, talking about Kulusevski, Son and Tel, is that he's been moaning for such a long time about not having a squad to be able to compete in these games, and now he finally has the players back from injury, so why would he not use them? And you have to agree, really, that Kulusevski's been due arrest for weeks now, because he's been played into the ground. So has Heung-min Son, and although he played really well against Ipswich, he's clearly needed a little bit of rest in his legs for a long time, and it just goes to show that the focus is just on the Europa League now. I think Ange has drawn a line under the league. We will win games until the end of the season, of course, but the Europa League, all our eggs are in that basket now. We have the road to Bilbao set out in front of us. We have a good chance of going there if the best version of Tottenham turns up in these knockout stages. And if we have to sacrifice games like tonight, ultimately, then I would be all for doing that. The only qualm I have with his team selection tonight is that Jed Spence didn't start, and I know that he has also played a lot of games over the last couple of months, but He's by far and away been our best player in the last month, at least, probably spanning back further. And when he came on off of the bench after the hour mark, he was again our best player. And we saw, rightfully so, he was getting all of the praise from Guardiola after the game. So although it's frustrating to lose, and you never like to lose, there was a lot of good stuff to take from this game. I think we can take solace in the fact that Udogie got a lot more minutes in this match, and he looks like he's finally back at fitness and able to compete and isn't at a risk of picking up another injury. The fact that we were able to get those rests into the legs of Kulusevski and Son. Odegaard came back, and I actually do think he was one of our brightest players in the game. He was really, really good. Bearing in mind, he's just coming back from injury as well. Gave him a really good run for his money. He just looks slightly off the pace in terms of sharpness, but the fact that he's taking his men on, beating them and trying to get crosses in or cut inside and have a shot, I absolutely love that from a winger. And on the other side, Johnson, perhaps not really at the level we want him to be tonight. But it's so difficult because I want to find the line between saying these players are just coming back from injuries, but it felt like it was a little bit of a familiar performance from the likes of Brennan Johnson and Pedro Porro tonight. I mean, that first half, if we are going to go into some of the negatives of this game, that first half was absolutely horrible to watch. Jeremy Doku, who was named man of the match at the end of the game, probably rightfully so. He had Pedro Porro on toast. He was bodying him all over the place, running past him, running into the space, put 2 or 3 on a plate for Erling Haaland across the entire game. And yeah, it was a painful watch. And I do worry about Pedro Porro's ability to actually defend, which is why I would have still started Jed Spence in the game over him, because we know he's a much better one-on-one defender than Pedro Porro. I do think Bentancur looked a little bit better again tonight, which is good to see, because the midfield has been an issue over the last few weeks, and I think that partnership between Bergvall and Bentancur could actually work. So that's another bit of encouragement we can take out of the game, because every game that we play, it looks like Lucas Bergvall is developing and becoming more and more mature with every second he has on that pitch. And I thought, again, he was a standout performer in the middle of the park. James Maddison was okay in spells, but he does look like he can be dangerous at any given moment across the game, which is, we're going to need that in that Europa League run. We're going to need his creativity, because often, and we saw it a lot against Manchester City tonight, Tottenham can be very one-dimensional in the sense that they just move the ball out to their wingers and they hope that they can either beat their men and get the cross into the box, or they cut inside, recycle to the midfield and go from there. And it doesn't always work, so we need that essence of unpredictability about us. And that's probably where Tell has been getting a little bit of the criticism. But guys, you got to give the guy a chance. He's 19 years old, just moved to a new country. He's played 3 or 4 games for us in a completely new team as a striker, having barely played any minutes for Bayern Munich this season. Give him a chance. It may be the case that he does, for now, work better on the wing, and we will see him there more when Solanke is back from injury, which will hopefully be next week. But that was probably a bit of a limitation from this game tonight, was the fact that Tell was struggling to hold the ball up into feet. He couldn't really get the better of his centre-back markers behind him, and he didn't really have any goal threat. So that's another on the negative side. Johnson and Porro's performances maybe on the negative side. But if we just round up and we look at the positive signs from tonight's game, we were able to rest a lot of our key players. And whether we like it or not, and whether we think it's the right thing to do when we play in a big game at home against a team like Manchester City, the emphasis and the focus is on the Europa League, and they need resting if we're going to compete and manage to get to the final. Fingers crossed that is a possibility for Tottenham. Those minutes being rested for those players like Kulusevski and Son are essential. So if he had to do it tonight, absolutely fine. And then it gives them another 8 days to be at full sharpness, full fitness before the Alkmaar game. Positives as well, if we continue looking at this encouragement, Lucas Bergvall looks like he's getting better by the minute on the pitch. Udogie is back from injury. Brennan Johnson is back from injury. We've got Vicario back, and he made some excellent saves, so it's good to have some solidarity and solidity in goal. Finally, the fact that Ange has options from the bench. So even if we are resting players, they can come off of the bench and have those minutes and spells on the pitch if we are chasing the game or looking to see things out. Kevin Danso has been absolutely phenomenal, I think, for Tottenham since coming in. in January, and with Van der Ven and Romero coming back but needing to be managed so they don't have reoccurring injuries all the time, I think that is another huge positive, that we've been able to see what Danso can do and what he can give us going forward, because he's very good in the air. He won a number of headers against City from corners, from set pieces in the game, and he loves to step out with the ball, and I think he did that really, really well. Tottenham just lacked that clinical edge tonight. That's unfortunately what was the difference between winning and losing the game, is we couldn't stick the ball in the back of a net, albeit we did have chances and the players just weren't up to the task of sticking the ball past Ederson, which is a shame. And it's 3 points dropped, and the chance to, win 4 in a row and have that momentum going into Europa League next week is now gone. But you have to stay positive in times like this. The second half performance was very encouraging, and will be well aware that he needs to manage and look after his players, and that priority, as I've said so many times in this video, is on the Europa League. So we have to move on. Onwards and upwards. The game is done. Drawn a line under it now. We've got Alkmaar next week, Bournemouth, Alkmaar again, and then I believe we're getting into some very, very tough territory with the likes of Chelsea coming up, with the likes of Liverpool coming up. So there's a lot still to play for, and I say this a lot, but yeah, heads up, a frustrating result tonight, but we go again. Big game next Thursday. Let's just hope that we are ready for it and we have the players available. Fingers crossed. But thank you so much for watching. Let me know your thoughts on the game down in the comments below. What was good? What was bad? What would you have done differently? And do you think we can make that all-important run to the Europa League final? Enjoy the rest of your week. I'll be back with a video over the weekend, considering Spurs aren't playing. I'll think of something creative. Enjoy the rest of your week, and as always, come on you Spurs.